Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Friday morning bite-sized conversations with me, Kylie Mowbray-Allen from Hello Media, and my digital my digital BFF, Jenni Walke from Elephant in the Room with Salty.
Well, you're on this way for me. You're there for me.
Well, because I got my new light sign, I just thought I'd flip it around on the wall for Zoom, but alas, no, it can't do that. So I have to flip my Zoom around. So now when I point this way, it's the wrong way. It's a little confusing.
That makes sense. I do love the sign though. That's new. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, it arrived last week. It's been missing in action for quite some time. And then I finally got the message saying that it was en route and it was in Lismore, literally the day after the floods. So I thought I'm never going to get it. And then many months later, it finally arrived. So
I love it. No, it's beautiful. I love it. Very, very cool.
Thanks very much. And so, Jenni, have you had a good week? Excuse me. Have you had a good week?
I've had a really great week, actually. I've had an amazing week. Just really good conversations, which, you know, I always love having. My glasses are fogging up this morning. Really good conversations with some amazing people, connected with some cool people at a networking event on Wednesday. I love in-person networking events so much. And it was just nice to sit in a room and have a cup of tea and chat to people about business and what we're doing in the world. And so it was, it's been a great week.
And how about you?
Sorry?
Yes, it's been interesting. So, Jenni, when is your event? Your event's coming up pretty soon.
It is. We've got a masterclass on Wednesday, the 30th of March. I'm very excited about it, actually. It's going to be a very fun one. We're actually talking a little bit about imposter syndrome and self-doubt and what kind of stops us doing the things we want to do. So basically, we're going to talk about the 5 confidence killers of top coaches and how to avoid them. So the things that we do without even realizing we do it, that really self-sabotage. And so we're going to talk about that. And I'm very excited about it.
Cool. And is that open to anybody?
Open to anybody. Anyone who wants to join, we'll get the girls to put the link in the chat on the Facebook page to register. I'm very excited because we're talking about stuff that, you know, it's those things that we don't even realize that we do that sabotages, you know, our business or our life or what we're doing, or whether it's creating a habit. There's all these things that we do that sabotages our success and we don't even realize it sometimes. And so wanting to kind of bring them to light, tell people what they might be, and then we're going to talk about how we can avoid them.
That sounds so good. And what about a meetup? I'm sure you've got a meetup coming up soon too.
Well, we haven't actually got a meetup yet. So we're looking to do an actual physical meetup. I may have found an amazing new space up here in Brisbane to connect, but we'll do a full event meetup, probably early March. Originally, we're going to do the 30th of March as a meetup, but we've decided we've got a lot of people having these conversations around doubt, particularly at the moment. And so we wanted to talk about that first at the next one, and then we'll probably do a more informal catch up in a couple of weeks.
Right. We have our meetup coming up on Monday, and it's a really interesting thing because, as you know, I run the monthly invite amazing women in business to be our speakers, and you know, my meetup group is positive, passionate businesswomen. So we have an incredible bunch of women that love to get together. And last week I ran, as you know, because you were there, just as a 1 hour on Friday, just an informal catch-up chat, because, you know, so many people are just so discombobulated at the moment. It was really wonderful. And then it's interesting you talk about doubts and things, because my topic for next Monday night, the speaker, is all about making your home glorious. And I felt how incredibly insensitive of me when so many people have lost their homes, not just here in Australia, but in the Ukraine. Like it's a thing going on. And it felt like it just didn't feel quite right. But I've booked the speaker, it doesn't feel right also to cancel someone. So I was definitely in a position of quite tricky, and you know where to go with it. In the end, I just decided to run with it, because even though I'm ensconced in this crazy world at the moment with post-flood recovery and all that, that's not the case for so many people. So I decided to run with it, but tricky, self-doubt.
It is soft, but what I love about this, I actually love the fact that you've got someone how to make your home feel comfortable. Like, I think actually it's a really nice one, because the reality is at the moment we don't have our normal home that we're with, right? For many people, they're not living in their home. So it's actually, the conversation might be how to make wherever you are feel like home. How do you actually feel settled and actually start to feel a little bit safe and secure, even though you know this is not going to be your forever space because you're in an evacuation center or you're sleeping on someone's couch, but you can still make that space feel like home, whether it's a physical thing, whether it's the way that you make your bed in the morning, or fold up your sleeping bag, or, you know, put a little picture of somebody next to it. So I think it's a nice way for people to think about where they are and how they can actually, when they come into their home, the way that they can set it up to make them feel home really quickly.
Jenni, I knew we needed that moment of discussion there, because that was perfect. That makes me feel so much better about it. And you're right. It's just a case of wording it slightly differently. And then when I introduce her, you know, bringing that into it. So thanks, as always, you and the clarity. Clarity should be your middle name, I think.
I think it might be.
So we're talking today about grants and possibilities, and, you know, it doesn't just need to be about what you've got right now and thinking, how will I ever get my business pumping, or, you know, how do I go to that next stage? And I thought it would be important to also mention there's obviously incredible grants out there, and I look forward to, you know, chatting about that with you, but also you can always go for a small business loan. There's ways around it. You can find someone that would like to invest in you. It might even be a family member or something that really believes in what you're doing and thinks that's very exciting. So I think there's quite a few ways. When I first started Rainbows Over, I was really concerned as to how I was going to do that. But because I'm in a little village and the local Summerland Credit Union, you know, knows that if anything were to happen and we needed to rent out our place straight away or whatever it was, that I could cover XYZ before there was even any income coming in. And she just went boom, just like that. So I feel like, you know, there are definitely ways, but for sure I want to hear about the grants and some ideas around that. So what have you got to share with us?
Well, grants are a really funny thing, because a lot of people kind of always look at big grants. They're always thinking that a grant is about getting a lot of money to make massive change in your organization. And there are a lot of grants out there that can do that. The government at the federal and the state level have a range of grants available to businesses, whether it's small business recovery, and there's still small business recovery grants available from, you know, disasters in New South Wales and Queensland from last year that potentially people can still access in some funding arrangements. So you can look at funding as a way to bolster your position or get you back on track, if you like, after a major event like we've had in Southeast Queensland and Northern New South Wales. And so you can look at it as this is like a stopgap. It's going to help us from kind of hemorrhaging too much money, or from, you know, recover from a disaster. And that's one way to look at a grant. But you can actually also sit back and say, well, how can we use funding from the government? And the government wants to give you money. I think that's the first thing to remember. The government wants to help us do better, right? That's what it has a social aim ultimately. And so the grants are available and out there for people to actually do good with, whether it's do good in their business, in their community, in their family, whatever it looks like. And so one of the things we have to remember is when the government wants to give us money, don't think, oh, well, I don't know if I'm good enough to get a grant. Talk about self-sabotage. People are like, oh, maybe it's not me. It's not enough. You know, I'm not doing enough in that space, whatever it is. The first thing is apply for it. Always, when you see a grant, take the time to apply for it. Now, if you're able to do it yourself, that's awesome. You can write your own grant application, and most people do write the grant applications. Other people employ people like myself or other professional grant writers to write it for them because they don't have that space. So that's your choice. But the first thing to do is take the time to look at the grant and apply for it, because there is money out there. The second thing to consider is, how can I use the money to actually grow my business? It's not about just getting cash flow. And that's one of the pieces I think I want to make sure people realize. Grants are not about just getting cash flow for your business. It's actually about expansion and growth. And so when you're looking at the different funding opportunities, and you say, well, I actually want to grow my business into a new sector. I want to diversify my business. There are actually small business grants available at various times throughout the year, specifically for that purpose, for businesses who want to scale and diversify their business. There's also specific grants available for people who just want to investigate whether or not something is possible. And some of those grants actually go up to $50,000 just to spend a year looking into and researching an idea. But then there's also these grants which are $3,000 to $5,000, which are far more regular. And those ones are about, I want to rebuild my website. I need some collateral and I don't know how to build it. So I need to employ a Kylie to help me do a brand refresh. Or I need to actually do a business plan or a pitch deck to do to seek investors or funding, or I want to go out and ask for other people to support us. I'm actually going to get a small $2,000 to $3,000 grant for those. And so there's so many grants available. The first thing to do is to know where to go, right? So you could just do the standard Google New South Wales, Queensland grants, federal government grants, and you'll get smacked in the face with a heap of things, right? The first thing to do is Grants Connect. Grants Connect is the federal government grant portal, and it has all the grant opportunities available at a federal level across all spectrums. Like we're talking big grants, little grants, short-term grants, ongoing grants. But then think differently. And this is where it's really important right now. Community grants are a huge thing. I've got many of my clients run community grant rounds. So mining companies, most mining companies run a community grant round in their area at least once or twice a year. You've got the gambling fund grant, which every state has a version of, and they can be upwards of $100,000 for major investment, redefining your business, you know, as I said, starting a new product line, completely starting a business in an innovative industry, whatever it might be. And so the thing is to look and go, well, what do I want to do with that grant? And so, but that's even before money is available. This is part of business planning. So while we're talking about grants, when it's available, actually take a step back at the start of the year, halfway through the year, and say, well, how do I want my business to grow? And where can I get some funds to support me to do that? And so that's the first question when we're looking at grants. I know I've just dumped a whole lot of information. I could talk about it all day.
So good, so good. And you know what, I've got to go back to what you said at the very beginning. The government wants to give you money. I'm having such a chuckle on that one because I'm clearly been experiencing something very different in the last few weeks with the government choosing which shires were bad enough to be, you know, deemed one extra $1,000 payment. Come on, $1,000 is not even gonna, it was extraordinary. Anyway, as of last night or yesterday morning, I think, they decided yes to Tweed Shire, Ballina Shire, Byron Shire, which was, you know, a good thing. So anyway, that's where my head was at when you were like, the government wants to give you, and I'm like, I'm wrong. But let's bring it back to business. Yep. So recently, you know, my brother was severely impacted by the floods, and he has his own small business, and I think there's a grant up to $15,000 for flood affected businesses, for example. So that's an exciting one. What was interesting is speaking to them about that, and how does that look when you can't actually prove anything that you've lost in terms of equipment because it's sitting under a giant pile out the front of your place waiting to be collected, and they're only mentioning this grant after you've already done that. And of course, there's no receipts, there's no anything because it's all been taken by the floods. So that's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and it depends on the grant. So some grants require you to provide receipts and proof. Others actually just ask you to say, for example, most grants will say, tell me how you're going to spend the money. So if you're asking for $5,000, for example, it might say, tell me how you're going to spend that $5,000. And you might say, I'm going to build a website. I'm going to do these two or three things. And the government will say, well, we think $5,000 is quite reasonable for a website. I don't need a receipt. I just need to know that it's this is what you're going to spend your money on. And at the end, they'll ask for a report. At the end, they'll say, send us a report of how you spent the money after the fact. And so that may or may not include receipts. In the absence of receipts, you can use a stat deck. You can actually say, well, this is what I spent the physical money on. These are the things that I purchased, and this is what we've done. But it's generally about acquitting the grant to say, yes, we spent the money on something. So it really depends on the grant size and the focus of the grant as to whether or not you need to prove, like physically prove, that you spent money on a specific thing. Most times they're looking for outcomes. So this is the other thing to remember when we're looking for grants. They're not looking for the minutiae of detail of, did you spend, you told us you're going to spend $20,000 on this infrastructure, but you only spent 18, but you spent 25 on this thing. You only thought you were going to spend 12. They don't necessarily want that. What they're looking for are outcomes. So when you're writing a grant application and looking at grant applications, you also want to look at what the aim and objectives of the grant are. So what is it trying to achieve? What area are we trying to respond to? And if it's flood relief, they want to see that the business is back up and running. So this grant will help me get my business back up and running because I need to buy this equipment in order to be able to continue to service the clients that I already have in my pipeline. So at the moment I can't because this happened. This is the outcome. And so the outcome will be I was able to continue business. My revenue was able to continue, and because of, directly as a result of you giving me money to buy this machinery, which enabled me to do this. So we want to think of outcomes.
I think that's such a really great point. And Jenni, I know that you write grants and you've got colleagues that also write grants. And I presume you all specialize in different areas. Would that be the case?
I don't do unsolicited grants. So I'm a process bunny. So I love a good, here's the form, go through the form and tell me the answers to the form. So, and because I do that in a very kind of structured way where I look at the questions and I say, well, what information do they want here? And then I'll go away and do some research on that and come back and then write. So most grant writers do that very similar way. We'll have conversations with our client first and say, what is it that you want? What do you need? And then we actually match our response to the objectives of the question. And this is really critical. And you and I have talked about this before about our business. You don't want to tell them what you want them to know. You want to tell them what they want to hear. So making sure you're wording it in a way that fits them, not just like, hey, I'm going to make this amazing thing. That's cool, but so what? Yeah. So, but some people do specialize. There are some people who do specialize specifically in particular sectors or particular industry, whether it's a government grants or whether it's community grants. But most professional grant writers can write pretty much any grant. They might just take a little bit longer to do it, or they might just need a little bit more information when they first start. But once you start writing grants, it just becomes a process. It's literally going through a process of a step-by-step. And I just prepped to this morning. There are a couple of Indigenous grants available with the Aboriginal Affairs Department in New South Wales. So I'm helping some clients build that. And there's literally, we do an Excel spreadsheet that says, this is the information that I need. These are the questions that we have to answer. This is what they're trying to achieve. How do we meet that objective?
Brilliant. I love the way you just broken that down that way. So that was going to be another question is, can people do it themselves? Or is it, and in fact, if you were to go to a grant writer like you or, one of your colleagues, what kind of money are people looking at?
How long's a piece of string?
What are they looking to invest? Is it like 5,000, 50,000, 500? What kind of money are you looking at?
It's a really good question, and unfortunately the answer is it depends. So one of the little known grants that a lot of people don't realize is the EMDG grant. It's the Export Market Development Grant that the government offers every year. So if your business is exporting, if you're working in exporting or looking to expand your business overseas, so bear in mind, looking to expand your business overseas, you don't have to be trading overseas, but you're looking to expand your business into an external market, into an international market, you can claim a portion of your expenses for your visits overseas. So when I went to Canada 3 or 4 years ago for the Indigenous Business, World Indigenous Business Forum, I was able to claim that because during that event, we had meetings with potential clients. I did promotions around the business. We did some networking events, and it was entirely focused on how do I expand my business into the Canada and North American market. So I was able to claim 50% of eligible expenses, and that includes things like accommodation, food, daily expenses, flights over there, trade show fees, all the things that I needed to get there and be successful. I was able to claim 50% of that. Now, for some people, that is actually, it's a really simple grant application to do, in fact. And as long as you have the evidence, there's not a question about getting it. Like, it's literally, this is what I'm doing. Here's your information, and anybody can do that. It's just a matter of working through the process and keeping records for that one. But there are grant writers who will actually do that for you, and they actually charge a percentage. So they'll charge a minimum of $1,500 or 10% of the money that you get back. So some people do a flat rate and some people will do a percentage of the grant amount. Now this one, because it's a payment back of things that you've already spent, it's a little bit, you can go, well, that's fair. I don't have the time to do this grant. If this person can do it for me and get me $50,000 back because I spent $100,000 on overseas marketing last year, then maybe 5,000 is okay. But I guess it comes down to what is it worth to you. So for my grant applications, depending on the size of the grant applications, in full disclosure, I charge between $2,000 and $5,000 for the grant. It depends on the size, the amount of research I need to do, the complexity of the grant, the volume of information they need. There's a whole lot of perspectives in that. And so, and when I've been lucky and blessed that every grant application that we've submitted, we've been successful for our clients in receiving. So that's awesome. And I feel really proud of that but it is a value exchange. They know they don't have that skill. So therefore they ask me to do it. But there are lots of government does a lot of grant writing programs. You can get a lot of free training at federal and state level and local government around how to write grants. And it might be something that actually a couple of clients of mine have said, can you just show us the formula? We might even just run a workshop in a couple of weeks when people are feeling that they want to start applying for grants. We'll just do a free workshop on how to apply for grants so that people can kind of start to do it themselves. So I don't mind that. It's just something that I do because other people can't, and I'm helping them do it. But I want people to just take it. Sorry.
No, I just was saying that's so awesome, because I think a lot of people are just like, where would I even begin? And, you know, we hear about a lot of people not getting the grants that I know a lot of people with those overseas ones you were talking about that spent the money assuming that they would get it back and then came back, have whacked up a debt and then don't get the grant. And it's like, oof.
And it's about following the procedures, and this is where being a process bunny is amazing. So, but what's really also interesting is the type of grants are available. We're always thinking big grants, but at the moment, for example, there's one that's still available. It's the Women's Leadership and Development Program, Lead and Succeed. It's a grant that's developed by the Prime Minister and Cabinet, and it's actually, I'm going to read it. It's about developing a range of products specifically for women, yada, yada, yada. And it says, basically, projects are about targeting women who live in regional, rural and remote areas, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, older women, women with disabilities, women from culturally diverse backgrounds. And the projects should be delivered on a national scale or be scalable. So it's saying if you run a program for women that you want to actually help women in a regional and remote area to build and succeed, come and talk to us, and you can potentially apply for a grant to roll that program out, which might reduce the cost for the women joining, or it might make it a zero cost for them, or it might give you the infrastructure that you need to build that program or design that program. So that's a very specific grant, which is ideal for community groups or with coaches who specialize in working with women, right? Particularly in remote areas. And the requirements are simply, basically tell us your program, tell us how it meets our needs. And if it meets the needs, we'll look at potentially investing in that. So it's actually thinking a little bit outside the box about, it's not just about, I'm going to deliver a product I do now. It might be an opportunity to say, is there something different that I can do that actually I can find a grant for?
That exact one you're talking about is one that we're looking at the moment for positive, passionate businesswomen. And it came out of the last week when we had that Friday morning chat and thinking, wow, I think there's some big opportunities here for regular, super informal chats. But when people come together like that, there's just amazing things that come out of it, as you know what happened last Friday. So pretty special. So it's very interesting, isn't it? So where do you think people should go to look at, you mentioned the website at the beginning, and I guess, does that have all of them on there?
So there's a couple of different ones. So there's the grant, it's quite literally grant.gov.au, all the generally business grants, but then there's also a community grants hub that government have. So that's communitygrants.gov.au. And I'm going to actually pop the details in the chat for everybody. And then we'll actually switch that over to, to the Facebook pages later. And so that's the first place to start for federal government grants. But you also, if you type in, for example, New South Wales community grants or New South Wales government grants, then you'll actually be able to find your state specific ones. So literally just put your state in front of those two words and you'll find something. But also, what you want to do is look into your community. If you live in the Hunter Valley, there are a lot of mining companies in the Hunter Valley. If you live in the Bowen Basin region here in Queensland, there are lots of companies in that area who offer versions of a community grant or a community fund. And so it's actually not just looking to government. Organizations, not only philanthropic organizations, but commercial organizations understand the value of supporting local community. It's in fact part of their mission in most organizations to actually give back and support what they would either call a host or a local community group. And so have a look at those organizations to see if they've got opportunities for community grants. I know BHP run them, Rio, Anglo, Glencore, all the South 32, all the companies, all the major mining companies have a version of community grants in their footprint, right? So it's about local communities. So don't just think federal government. Look at commercial organizations. There's a beautiful company, there's a, up here in Queensland, there's the Queensland Community Fund, I think it's called, and they actually invest, their entire focus is investing in Queensland community, particularly in the regional areas. But the way that it's a perpetual fund that's been donated by incredible philanthropists across Queensland, and they actually just spend the interest. So what they've done is they've got a particular amount of money, and the interest is what they actually spend on grants every year. So the more philanthropic people provide, the interest grows, but it means it's a perpetual fund. So they'll never run out of money because it's managed in a very particular way. And those grants can be up to $10,000. So it's just really looking at saying, what do I want to do for my business first? And being a little bit adventurous, going, you know, you might find community grants, innovation grants, excellence grants, diversifying grants. So use that kind of language and you'll actually be surprised at what might come up.
Thanks, Jenni. And what about yourself? I don't mean you, I mean people and themselves. Do you think it's worth trying on your own to apply?
I think to start with, I actually believe it's a skill or a process that everybody should at least try once, right? Because it does actually give you, it shows you where your gaps are. And then you can go, okay, well, is this something that I want to develop for myself? But you know me, that's my view of being a small to medium business owner, know how to do it, and then decide whether you want to do it or not. And for most people, you'd be surprised how easy it is to write the grant application. It just requires an arm's length view of your business. So I would say, yes, try it yourself. But for anybody who's listening, if you write your own grant application and you want someone to put an eyeball over it, reach out to us. We can have a look through it to make sure it's okay, make sure it's ticked all the boxes, and show you if you need any support in doing it. We're happy to do that for you. We do that for our clients now who don't get us to actually write their grants. We actually just do an eyeball and run an eyeball over them. But having said that, there's another piece I just want to share. There are some grants that are available that require a consultant. So for example, if for example, one of them was a digital marketing grant available and the money was actually going to be paid directly to you, Kylie, you could also offer as a coach, you could write the grant for your client. So you could actually prepare their grant application for them in discussion with them. And then they submit that grant application. But if you're actually going to get the benefit out of the grant, for me, I know I do that. If I've got a grant where I'm actually going to be a direct beneficiary because I'm providing the coaching services that we're writing about, then I might say, actually, I won't charge you for this grant, or I'll charge you 50% now. And then when we get the grant, 50% of the money can come back from the grant so that we hedge our bets because there's a mutually agreed or mutual benefit out of the grant. And that's a lot of ways coaches could do it. And I've done that with much larger grants, particularly if I'm going to be supporting the delivery of the grant, or we're doing it for developing a program or providing coaching services and so on. So there are ways that you can actually get support from a grant writer like myself, and who's also a coach, or yourself, without actually having to write your own grant. So again, think outside the box, have a chat to the person that you want to work with and say, hey, would you be interested in kind of working with me on this?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you and I both won, well, not won, I don't know if that's the right word, but had clients working with us last year who got those Queensland government grants.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is what's out there that's just for different states. And you mentioned about the community grants, which I think was a great one. We've got some amazing ones here in the Byron Shire. that often, nothing to do with government at all, but about really trying to help small business grow in our regional area. But what's so interesting, I think, is from my perspective, and if anyone out there knows something different, let me know. But it seems to me Queensland nails it when it comes to grants for small business. New South Wales, not quite so much. So it's interesting.
Also, I do find the New South Wales grant hub incredibly difficult to navigate. I'm not going to lie. When I've gone to have a look through there, it has been a little bit kind of like, oh my God, it's a bit difficult to kind of navigate. But also looking at things like Regional Development Australia. So they're government organisations, but they're so regional development in your state or in your area, I think I looked at, and when I prepped, I'm just going to open this for early, there's regional development, particularly for, that's regional development grants at the moment that have come up particularly around the floods in regional New South Wales. And I've just added that one in for our New South Wales, listeners. And so there's lots of different local grants. I actually just tend to go through, I don't go into the specific state government hub information. I literally Google New South Wales, if it's an Aboriginal community, if it's a disability community, and actually put the keyword and then the grant after it. So it might be disability grants, community grants, Indigenous community grants, rebuilding grants, because that actually helps narrow down your search, but also it can uncover things that you may not see through a typical grant portal.
Absolutely. I just thought that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenni. So I'm looking forward to, we're about to turn off the cameras, or not the cameras, the live, stop the recording, and then the people that are in here with us, we're going to chat with them and do some coaching. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to jump in and ask us some questions in private, then jump on in, because I know that Jenni is a wealth of knowledge on this topic. It's amazing. So Jenni, perhaps when you run the one for grants, where you're going to be helping people, perhaps write their own grants, etc., will you be letting us know on your socials and in your newsletter? I think everybody needs to sign up to your newsletter ASAP.
Yeah, I always, whenever a grant comes out, that particularly, I do it for my clients up here, and actually just not even my clients, people that I engage with up here, I always share the grants that are available that come across my desk that I think might be relevant to people. I normally do that just through direct emails. I'm more than happy to add a tag and put it onto my Facebook. We'll start putting it onto our Facebook page. So Elephant in the Room, so EITR, my goodness, Elephant in the Room AU on Facebook. I don't know, website or Facebook today. We'll start putting the different grant links on our Facebook page, and we'll just do a hashtag that says grants, so that when grants do come up, people can search as hashtag grants on our Facebook page, and they'll be able to see any of the grants that are currently available in some of the portals that are there.
Magic. Thank you. Now, I wanted to remind everybody also, as it is today, the 18th of March, that next week, the .au domains become available, or the URLs. So you'll want to grab that if you can. And so make sure that you get in touch with your service provider, or get in touch with Brad from XY Zulu that we had on here a few weeks back, and make some magic happen, because that's a cool one. I'm just jealous that I can't get it. So,
can I just share one particular one that I think is really, that last link that I'll put out, the RDI grant, so the regional development grants, they actually list all the different grants that are available, that are current at the open, federal, state, a whole range of it. And there's a couple that are open for the next couple of weeks, particularly, it's basically the James Frizzell Charitable Foundation. And it looks at a whole range of grants around community health, disability, homelessness, domestic violence, housing and accommodation, mental health, and natural disaster grants. So that grant closes, and that's been open since February, but that grant actually closes on the 31st of March. So please, if you're looking for helping to rebuild, or if you're in a community, particularly at the moment, who've had some challenges, there are a couple of grants that are available right now that may be able to help you with your rebuilding, or just to service your clients in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Jenni. And how do people book time with you, or what's the process for them to be able to get you to write the grant for them, if that's the road they want to go down?
If you want me to talk to you about Grant, then we would just book a 30-minute Calendly appointment with me. We'll have a Zoom chat. We'll talk about it. We'll decide whether or not it's a right fit, whether you should apply or whether you could do it yourself. So you can just jump on a free chat. We'll put the call, the link for how to book a 30 minutes with me in underneath the video. So anyone who wants to do that, please reach out. Otherwise, you can get me on my socials at Elephant in the Room AU on Insta and Facebook, or email us through our website. So that's the best way. Just find a way to catch up with me and we can chat about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenni. That was super interesting this morning.
I know I just kind of did a brain dump, but I think it's a really valuable kind of conversation to have. And this is stuff that's available at any time.
Just amazing. Thank you so much. I love your brain dumps. That was just magic. So thanks everyone for being here and listening. And for those of you listening on the recording, I'm sure you found that very, very useful. Next week, we're going to be talking about, I'm pretty sure our topic next week is about the importance of clarity and how to get clarity in your business. So I'm really looking forward to that chat as well. So see you same time next week, bite-sized conversations with Kylie Mowbray-Allen from Hello Media and
Jenni Walke from Elephant in the Room.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Great to be with you.